What's going on, everybody? Pastor Wes here, and this is the start of our summer Bible study video series. Now, what I'm going to be doing differently this summer for the month of July and August is I'm going to be expanding on the Sunday message that you previously heard. And so what makes that a little bit different is that it's going to give you, if you will, a backstage view to some of the sermon preparation, maybe some of the things that God was kind of revealing to me as I sat with the text, or it may bring in other scriptures that help to elevate the point that was made on Sunday. And so I'm excited this week to share a little bit of an expanded view of the Prelude, which we heard this past Sunday. If you recall, we were in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 1, and we read verses 4 through 10. But I want to highlight the text that was particularly highlighted by me in the overall conversation, and that was verse 5. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you. I appointed you a prophet to the nations. Now, in my view, that particular verse 5, highlights the idea that God has a prelude. If you remember, I was saying that a prelude is kind of an introductory piece that sets up and sets the stage for the rest of what comes after it. If you have an introductory song on an album, it's going to set the stage for the rest of the album. If you have a prelude on a orchestral arrangement, that prelude will set up the rest of the orchestra piece, and so on and so forth. And so a prelude is something that sets the stage for the rest of things. And what God was telling Jeremiah is before he was even a thought in his parents' mind, God already knew him. And then he goes on to say that before you were even in your mother's womb, I consecrated you and appointed you a prophet to the nations. So God created the purpose for Jeremiah before he even set foot on this earth, before he took his first breath in this world. And so all of us, like Jeremiah, were known by God before we were a thought in our parents' mind. We had a purpose that was set before us long before we came into this world. And for many of us, we spend a majority of our lives trying to figure out, trying to decipher what that purpose is. And the difficulty with that is that we have a God that often doesn't speak the same way to each person. We have a God that will often speak to us through people that are closest to us. Sometimes God will speak to us through people that we don't even know or have never met before in our lives. But God does speak to us, and God does place within us God's Spirit. And so there is something internally in us that draws us to particular things. That's why I'm always fascinated by seeing the types of things that children take an interest in. Sure, will children gravitate towards the things that they see their parents do? It's entirely possible, because we are creatures of habit, and we are also creatures that learn from others. And who better to learn from than your earthly parents, right? They are the ones who are appointed to be the parents for you here on earth, as a substitute, as a proxy for your heavenly parent in heaven, God. And so when we think about that, children might gravitate towards what their parents do, but that's not always the case. They may gravitate to something else. And I'm always fascinated to see what they gravitate towards, because there's an internal mechanism drawing them towards their purpose, drawing them towards who God has created them to be, because that was placed within them long before they got here. And so it also highlighted to me a particular text in Proverbs. As I was preparing last week's message, this statement in Proverbs kept reverberating in my mind. I didn't mention it on Sunday, but it was reverberating in my mind because I thought about my own personal journey and the fact that there were certain plans that I had. There were certain plans that I wanted to pursue. There were certain plans that I thought were going to be what I became and who I became. And God was the one who had to allow his purpose to prevail. And that text is in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21. The human mind may devise many plans, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will be established. So what that speaks to me is that we can have plans, We can have things that we try to do. But the purpose that God has, the purpose that God placed within us long before we were in our mother's womb, long before we were a thought in our parents' mind, that purpose is what is going to prevail. And we have to be sensitive to the fact that God put a purpose in us that supersedes our job, that supersedes our hobbies, that supersedes all of the other things that we might engage in. We have to be acutely aware of the purpose that God has in us, because the prelude to our lives is that God gave us a purpose before we even set foot on earth. And so when we think about the message that came from Jeremiah, the conversation between Jeremiah and God, revealing to Jeremiah what his purpose was, there are some things that we've got to do in order for us to implement this in our lives, to truly embrace the idea of the prelude. The first thing is we have to seek God and ask God. Look, when something has been created, anything that's been created, you have to go to the creator for an understanding of its functioning. For example, if somebody builds a computer, if somebody builds a toaster, if somebody builds any type of machinery that we're going to use, they usually give you an owner's manual. The owner's manual sets forth the details from the owner, from the creator, as to how you're supposed to use that particular machine. Well, we were created by a creator. So who better than to ask for what my purpose is and what I'm called and placed on this earth to do than to go to the creator? You've got to ask God and seek God diligently where he may be found and allow God to reveal to you what your purpose is. The second thing that we've got to do is we have to have strategically people who are around us. My wife Sasha will often refer to these individuals as her eagle eyes. These are spiritual leaders that she trusts to be able to speak life into her and to reveal certain truths about her that maybe she might be blind to, or that maybe she's not really seeing or recognizing. It's important for us to have people in our lives who can speak that life to us and direct us toward the purpose of God that's in us. Because truthfully, if you have people who are spiritually minded people, if you have individuals, godparents, a pastor, deacons, elders in the church, if you have individuals like that in your life, they are going to point things out to you that will point you back to your purpose. And then finally, you have to be in the Word of God constantly. The reason why Bible study is so important every Thursday is because it keeps us in the Word of God. And it shouldn't just be on Sunday and on Thursday night that you're in the Word. You've got to be in the Word every single day, because the Word of God is going to be the truth. We talked about an owner's manual. Here's your owner's manual. This is the truth that will reveal to you the purpose that God has for you in your life. So again, let's just go ahead and repeat that. All right, so number one, you've got to go to the Creator. Whoever has been created, they must go back to the manufacturer, the Creator, in order to understand their purpose. Two, you've got to have people in your life who are going to speak life into you and point you back to your purpose. And number three, you've got to be in the Word of God on a consistent basis, asking for God to reveal truth. When we read the Word of God, it's not just for us to read the stories. It's for God to reveal God's truth about us and about our lives to us as we read the Word. That's why the Word of God is a living and breathing thing. It will say something different to you in one season of your life than it does in another season of your life. Read the Word of God and be in the Word of God consistently. And in that way, the prelude that God has for you in your life will become evident. The prelude that God has for your life, that purpose, will become much more rich. And you will be able to pursue that purpose in a way that honors God and lets your light shine before others for the world to see. I hope that is helpful. I hope that has illuminated the Word of God from this past Sunday. If you want to listen to the entirety of that message, you can go to Priesthood of Believers podcast on Spotify, and you can listen to the message, the prelude, and you can hear it for yourself. But I encourage you to reflect on what we just discussed, the ways in which we can implement that word in our lives on a consistent basis. All right, you take care and be blessed. I hope you will join us for worship service on Sunday, 9:30 a.m., right here at 259 Lafayette Avenue in Hawthorne, New Jersey. Or you can join us on our Facebook page and join us for worship via streaming. We also have a YouTube channel as well that you can join us for streaming. Take care, be blessed, and by the way, happy 4th of July.